They say in every war, there are those who fight with guns and those who fight with secrets. But Timothy Webster was something else entirely, a man who could wear loyalty like a mask. Before the first cannon roared over Fort Sumter, Webster wasn't a soldier. He was a detective, working for the Pinkerton Agency, a quiet man who knew how to listen more than speak. He could fade into a crowd, become someone else at will, and make a liar trust him completely. When war came, Alan Pinkerton, the Union's master of intelligence, handpicked him for a mission unlike any other: to slip behind Confederate lines and become one of them. He grew a beard, changed his accent, and took on the name of a traveling Southern merchant. In Richmond taverns, he'd sit with rebel officers, trading tobacco and rumors, while his sharp eyes recorded every uniform, every whispered plan. And when night fell, those same plans were coded, sealed in wax, and sent back north to Washington. The Confederates thought he was theirs. The Union swore he was loyal. And for a while, they were both right. It was the beginning of a dangerous double life, one where a wrong word could mean a noose, and the truth could kill faster than a bullet. And friends, if you've been enjoying these true Civil War stories, the ones history textbooks left in the shadows, take a second to support the channel. Your likes and subscriptions help keep these forgotten voices alive. By the winter of 1861, Timothy Webster's disguise wasn't just a role, it had become a reality. He was now the Confederacy's most trusted courier, the man who could carry secrets through checkpoints, whisper to generals, and vanish before dawn. But what no one in Richmond knew was that every letter, every order, and every boastful conversation was being funneled straight into the hands of the Union. He'd built a perfect illusion, feeding the South just enough truth to make his lies believable, and giving Washington just enough falsehood to keep them guessing. Even his own handlers at Pinkerton's headquarters began to wonder, whose side is Webster really on? And maybe, deep down, Webster wondered too. When you live inside two uniforms long enough, the seams begin to blur. His partner, Hattie Lawton, posed as his wife, a calm, sharp-eyed woman who smuggled invisible ink in perfume bottles and hid cipher keys in the soles of her shoes. Together, they danced through danger, two ghosts on the same tightrope. They met under church roofs, behind tailor shops, and in train stations filled with soldiers who never looked twice. Every message they sent was a gamble. Every silence, a sentence. It was no longer about money or even the war. For Webster, it had become a test of skill, the thrill of staying one step ahead of two armies at once. He was the perfect spy, until the world he built started to close around him. If you've made it this far into Timothy Webster's secret world, you're the kind of listener who values the untold stories. So before we move to the moment when everything unravels, take a second to subscribe or leave a comment below. Tell us which side you think Webster truly belonged to, because in the next part, he won't belong to either. Every spy knows, the closer you get to truth, the thinner the ground beneath you becomes. By early 1862, Timothy Webster was balancing on that thin ground. His reports were getting riskier, his meetings more exposed. He'd outsmarted generals, charmed officers, and slipped through enemy lines. But now, unseen hands were writing his downfall. Two Union couriers were sent south to deliver new codes and collect Webster's reports. But they never reached him. Confederate scouts intercepted them, and among their captured documents were the very letters that tied Webster to the Union spy ring. Within days, his name was whispered in every Richmond barracks. The merchant from Baltimore, they said, is no merchant at all. When Webster arrived in Richmond for his next meeting, he found the welcome had changed. No smiles. No handshakes. Just soldiers waiting in the shadows. They arrested him at once. The Confederacy couldn't believe the man who'd carried their secrets was a traitor. And when word reached Washington, even the Union wasn't sure what to believe anymore. Alan Pinkerton tried to protect him, but in the chessboard of war, even masters can't save every piece. The Confederates dragged Webster before a tribunal. They read his own reports aloud, line by line. Proof written in his own hand. He stayed silent, eyes steady, until the end. They sentenced him to hang. The man who fooled both armies had finally run out of sides to stand on. Friends, if you're still here listening, you're part of a small group who keeps these lost Civil War stories alive. Your support, your comments, your shares, they're what keep history breathing on this channel. In the next part, we stand with Timothy Webster on the morning of his execution. Richmond, April 29th, 1862. The morning sky was gray, that kind of colorless light you only see before something final. Timothy Webster stood inside a small cell near the city gallows. His hands were bound, his coat still bearing the dust of travel. For weeks he'd been questioned, condemned, and cut off from the world he once played so easily. But those who saw him that morning said he looked calm, not defiant, not broken, just quiet, as though he'd already accepted what the world refused to understand. They led him through the streets, past men who once toasted him, women who once trusted him, soldiers who now spat his name. At the foot of the gallows, a Confederate officer offered him one last chance to confess, to admit who he truly served. Webster said nothing. He only asked that his partner, Hattie Lawton, be spared. She was still in prison, beaten, but alive, and he wanted her to stay that way. They bound the rope. The crowd fell silent. A Union spy wearing a Confederate coat, dying beneath a Southern sky. At 9 o'clock, the trapdoor fell. Timothy Webster, the man who fooled both armies, was gone. He became the first Union spy executed in the Civil War. Pinkerton called it a tragedy. The Confederates called it justice. History called it silence. In war, there are no easy heroes. There are only those who play the game too well, and those who pay the price for playing it at all. If you're one of the thousands watching tonight, keeping these stories alive, thank you. This channel isn't about numbers or trends. It's about memory. So if you believe stories like Webster's should never fade into the dust, take a moment to subscribe or share this with someone who remembers what history feels like. When the rope went still and the crowd drifted away, the story of Timothy Webster didn't end. It simply slipped into the shadows where it had always belonged. His execution sent ripples through both armies. The Confederacy began hunting spies with ruthless precision, and the Union, shaken by the loss of its finest agent, began guarding secrets even from its own. It was the day American espionage grew up. Years later, whispers began to surface. Some said Webster hadn't died that day, that the Pinkertons staged it all, that a body double swung from the gallows. Others swore they'd seen him out west, living under another name, carrying the same quiet gaze. But there's no proof, no grave marked with certainty. Only a handful of coded letters and a ghost who seemed to serve two flags, yet belonged to none. In the grand story of the Civil War, filled with battles, generals, and glory, Timothy Webster's war was invisible. He fought not with bullets, but with trust. And in the end, that trust from both sides was what killed him. So tonight, as we close this story, remember this: loyalty is never simple. And in a war between brothers, even the truth can be a dangerous disguise. If you've stayed with us through all 5 parts of this journey, you're the reason these stories still have a home. Most of our viewers are veterans, history lovers, and lifelong learners, people who know that remembering the past is how we honor it. If that sounds like you, take a moment to subscribe, or just drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Your voice keeps these forgotten names from vanishing completely. This is episode 4, The Spy Who Fooled Both Armies, and I'm honored to share it with you, here on U.S. Civil War History.